Hi, everyone. Good morning, or it's morning time for me at least. I'm here in sunny Los Angeles. It is currently 9 a.m. or 9:02 a.m. Let me know where you are in the comments. Drop your location in the chat if you are tuning in live today. For everyone who is not tuning in live, we are going to talk about small talk today. So today is going to be a really fun session where we'll go over how to think about small talk so it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming. In fact, if you are someone that doesn't like small talk, feel free also to drop that into chat. Once again, good morning, everyone. We are going to get started with it right now. So let's jump straight in. Okay, so, and good afternoon to the folks who are in different time zones. Yay. Okay, so let's start with naming that feeling before we even name the fix. And that is, what do you do when the conversation stalls, when the conversation feels incredibly difficult, right? And that is what we are going to go over, which is saying that honest, uncomfortable feeling out loud. So that way we can go through the part where we try to address it. Also, I give you permission to stop looking for the absolute perfect line in every conversation. That's not what today's chat is about at all. Today, we are going to go over tips and tactics, but it is never about feeding you the perfect line that you need to use every single time because that's not a normal conversation. Okay, and also, we're going to go over 3 small moves that you can use in your next conversation or your next conference or your next meeting where you're not sure what to say. And finally, we are we are going to keep in mind what is your worst small talk memory that you've ever had and how can we let this go? And once again, this is an introvert's guide to getting booked small talk that doesn't feel small. Okay. So let's start with this. We're going to reframe what small talk is actually for. And it has a job, which is to help us figure out if we should keep talking. So most people think small talk is it's the warm up before we get into the conversation. I like to think of small talk is that's a great point at which we can gut check. Do we want to or do we need to keep talking to this person? So small talk is also a great time before you dive into the harder questions where you can break away. Okay. And of course, 2 minutes of real curiosity with someone is always going to be better than 1 hour of exhausting performance. So we want to be incredibly curious about the person that we are talking to. And it's always helpful to bring a sense of warmth also into the conversation as well. And we want to make sure that we are practicing doing small talk. Okay. Yes, it is also incredibly tiring. So, oh my gosh, we have so many people tuning in. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in from every place around the world. I apologize if I say your name wrong. Morning to Christopher. Morning to, of course, Shelby, who's helping run this. Morning to William. Morning to Zaleh. Morning to Marina. Apologies if I mispronounced it. Morning to Jeff, also from LA. Yay. Okay, so we are going to start, and we're going to start by running a poll. And this is our ABC question. So, what is really your challenge with small talk? Is it starting the conversation? Is it keeping it going? Is it knowing how to end it? And this is the coolest part. We are going to run this poll live. So put into one if your hardest part of doing small talk is starting the conversation, beginning the conversation. Put in two if it's keeping it going, and put in three if it is knowing how to end the conversation, knowing how to exit into the other bigger talks that you're doing. So put it into chat directly. And this is the coolest part. It will show up in this, for me, it shows up here, this amazing mini poll, what everyone thinks. So whatever it is, 1, 2, or 3, drop it into chat and we'll see the results live. So hi, Matthew. Hi, Martin. And I can't see the other person. So hi, LinkedIn user from New York City. So drop in the poll. What is the hardest part? I think for me personally, honestly, I have to say it's one. It's getting into the conversation because I tend to be a very anxiety brained person. So just getting into the conversation is hard. Once I'm there, I can have the conversation, but just starting, engaging usually is the toughest part for me. I see a lot of twos in the chat, keeping it going. I see a lot of equal number of ones and twos. So keep voting if you haven't already voted. Thank you so much. Of course, I always have to thank Shelby, who's working behind the scenes really diligently. She put up this poll for us. So everyone, thanks, Shelby. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to go sequentially through all of these different parts of small talk. And also, please, whenever you have a question, this is the whole point of doing this live. Drop in your questions live in the live stream, and I will answer the questions live, either right now when I pull it out, or I will answer them as we go through and we get towards the end part of our conversation. So we're going to start with openers that skip that awkward intro. And I myself am a very awkward person, so I don't always mind the awkwardness, but for me, it's getting over that mental block of jumping into the awkwardness. Okay, so you are going to already be physically in a room, usually when you're doing small talk. Now, what I'm going to talk about today, a lot of it is, in fact, I would say 90% of it is related to small talk, not that you're doing virtually, but that you're doing in person, because that is usually the harder small talk to do, right? So we're going to use the room as a script because you are already present, whether you are at a meeting, whether you are at a conference, you're already present somewhere that you can use context in order to get over that awkwardness hump. Okay, so you can always start with, these are classic ways of starting the conversation. For example, how is your day going? What brought you here? Is your first time attending? Right, especially if you're at a conference. So I'll be at a conference later this month, not later this month, later this year, called Adobe Max. So I'll ask the question, is it your first time attending Adobe Max? So that's a great starter question. I'm going to say them again. How's your day going so far? What brought you here? And is this your first XYZ? Right. So it's also helpful to then, if you started with one of those questions, comment on something that you've both experienced in the last hour. So maybe you recently attended a keynote together, you both sat in the audience, you saw the keynote, you can then comment on the keynote together. So say, oh, what did you think of X's talk during the keynote? Or what was an interesting thought that you had about the keynote? It's also helpful, and this is me as a food person. In fact, I have my coffee here. Who else has their coffee or tea or multiple drinks with them in chat? Let me know in chats while I take a sip of my coffee. Yum. You can also comment, of course, on the drink situation, whether that's, of course, if you are in a coffee situation where they have catered coffee, or they have tea, or they have you're literally at drinks, because sometimes we are at these networking sessions that are incredibly exhausting and overwhelming. Commenting on the drink selection is another thing to do, or commenting on The snack selection is another thing. I remember recently I was in a green holding room for an event, and they had to run out of snacks completely. There was no snacks in the snack area. So there's just empty baskets where the snacks should be. And I started a conversation around not having any snacks. So really you can start the conversation around anything. I find food is really easy. I find drinks are really easy, whether that's coffee, tea, or actual alcoholic drinks, or what you just witnessed. So someone doing a keynote or someone speaking ahead of you in a meeting, especially if you were at a retreat, you can talk about, oh, we just heard this speaker. What did you think? We have a couple of tea and coffee drinkers in the chat. Okay, so also, if you are standing in line, you can also talk to the person in front of you or in back of you. So in my very early 20s, I did this exercise because I was very nervous about speaking to strangers. So one of the things that I did was I talked to the person in front of me in line. I said, "Oh, I love your shoes." I would always start with a simple compliment. And then I would go into or try to go into the rest of the conversation. Once again, for me, the opener was the most difficult part. So once I said hello, it was a little bit microscopically easier for me at the time to continue that conversation. And yes, Shelby, I'm a multiple drink person. I have my water and my coffee here. Always stay hydrated. Okay, so once again, if you're standing in line, you can talk to the person either in front of you or behind you in line. I feel like it's always a little less awkward to talk to the person in front of you. It's whoever you can also catch the eye of if you're waiting in line. And also, one thing that's helpful is if you see someone standing alone, especially at a small group party or at an event, or if you're literally in the networking session of an event, if you see a person standing alone or you see a group of three, right? We're looking for uneven numbers. That is a group that you can then step into and try out one of your openers with. Okay, so now we are going to do step 2, which is we are going to lower the bar. We're still in opener. So we're still in the opener section. We're going to lower the bar for what counts as an opener. So a simple hi or hello counts as an opener, right? So we don't need to overcomplicate it. If you are thinking, I can't remember all these questions that she just told me to ask, we can always start with a hi or hello. An exercise that I like to do in person when I do introvert sessions is I run a very simple script, and that is, hi, my name is, and then you allow for a pause. And then the other person says, hello, my name is, right? So you start with, hi, my name is, and then you pause and you ask the question, what's your name? And then the other person answers with, hello, my name is, right? And then you jump into the conversation. So that to me is always a easy one to ask. Now, if you are, I just saw somebody say, I'm usually the one alone. I have been there. This is when it's helpful to find another person who's standing alone, or if you don't want to approach a single person standing alone, approach a group of 3 because odd numbers are really helpful when you're at a conference or at an event, because then you can pair off into one person talking to one person and one person talking to another person. So it's helpful to approach uneven groups. Now, it is really stressful, at least for me, to approach a group of 7, right? So look for these smaller groups. Okay, we have a great question from Selby. I noticed small talk has really died down. Any waiting period seems like they're looking at their phones. Do you ever think it's a good idea to interrupt them on their phones? So I will give a time when you shouldn't interrupt somebody on their phone. If they are literally talking on their phone, right? Their phone is against their face, or they clearly have their headphones in, that is not a time to talk to someone. And once again, sometimes that means too that that person is overwhelmed. They don't want to talk to anyone. And they're listening to music or they're on a call. So if they have their headphones in or they literally have their phone against the face, do not interrupt. It is quite rude. Also, if you sometimes I'll sometimes see this, which is somebody is looking at their phone and they have the most intense look of concentration I have ever seen. I try not to interrupt those people as well. But when I do interrupt is if someone is looking like they're casually glancing at their phone, but also looking around the room. If they look like they're doing light scrolling, what I might do is I might say, "Hi," I will just literally do the introduction I just said. I will say, "Hi, I'm Goldie. I hope I'm not interrupting." And that's what I'll say. "I hope I'm not interrupting" is a great way to excuse it. And if they don't want to talk to you, if they have good boundaries, then normally what they'll say back is if they are busy, they'll respond back with, "Oh, I apologize. I'm taking this call," or "I have to handle this." And then I say, "Okay." And I walk away. I say, "No worries," and I walk away. So I try to give them out by saying, "Hope I'm not interrupting." And then that gives them the out that if I am interrupting, they can say, "No, thank you." Okay, now one of the easiest things to do is wear your name tags as well. So if you were once again at an event, wearing your name tags, if you were at a virtual event, and for me, my name is right here, having your name prominently displayed for if you were on a Zoom or you're on a another service, you're on a chat, having your name displayed is really important, so make sure that every single time you do a virtual event, you are displaying your name because it's a little bit easier for people to jump in. Now, I will also, and a great opener to jump in on if you are a participant on a virtual chat is the question that I asked in the very beginning. Where are you coming in from? So I encourage you that in literally every single time you do a Zoom like this or you do a live stream like this, if the host asks that question, always jump in. And the reason being, especially with what city are you in, is that you never know if you'll discover someone else who is also in your city. So, say you're in Chicago, you'll find somebody else that's based in Chicago. So, that is helpful. And then later, you can, if you make a note of that person, you can reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I saw you on Goldie's live stream for an introvert's guide to getting booked small talk that doesn't feel small. And I saw that you're also from Chicago. Would love to connect." Right? As simple as that. That immediately becomes your opener. But if you don't participate, then you can't be included. So once again, I know it can feel very overwhelming to jump in, to ask questions in a live stream or in a group setting. But whenever you have those easy questions where everyone is answering, I encourage you to answer those questions because that is a form of opening the small talk but in the group context. Okay, so it's also helpful to do a thoughtful comment on someone else's longer question. So I will give the example right now. It literally just happened in chat if you want to look at chat. So Shelby offered a really great insight, a really nice long question. And Zalay then responded with true. So this is also a way to engage in small talk, which is someone will say the longer comment, they'll say some insightful thing, and then you'll have a response. So that's the time when you can say respond. And also, I see also Christopher responded also to that or responded to me, whichever way. And that's helpful. So you don't always need to do a long comment to respond to something that's happening either in a live stream or once again on a virtual meeting. You can respond with a short comment that references something else. Also, it's helpful to use if there's a hashtag associated with the event or a hashtag associated with it, you can respond to that. Or one thing that I like to do is if I see someone that I know who jumps into chat too, I'll say hello to them in the chat. So, for example, I know Dr. Lori Walker, so I would say, "Hello, Dr. Lori Walker." I would reference them in my chat. So I would reference them as a participant in the chat. I would reference them again. And then also, and I mentioned this a little bit before, keep track of interesting people. So I serve on the board of this organization that is between the UK and the US. And what is so cool about it is that the people who participate work in very high levels across the board in really interesting industries. So I mentioned before in one of the chats I write for Archie Comics, and another person had just started writing for Marvel Comics. So we kind of clocked each other. We'd notice each other as people to talk to. And afterwards, I'll say this afterwards, that person reached out to me and was like, we should talk more about comics. And I was like, great, I'd love to. And I'd already written down and do this on your phone. You don't need to do it on a virtual pad, but I always have a simple post-it and a pen with me so I can write down names of people that I want to connect to, especially when I'm a participant in a virtual chat. Okay, that was openers. So now we are going to jump into curiosity prompts that create real connection. And once again, if you've just jumped into this call, this live stream, and you want to vote on this, what's your biggest challenge with small talk? Type 1, 2, or 3 into the chat. Is it 1, starting the conversation, which we just went over, openers and prompts? Or is it keeping it going? Or is it knowing how to end it? The graceful exit, right? Okay, here we go. So we're going to jump back into it, and we are now in part 2, which is curiosity prompts that create real connections. So now we are in the part of keeping it going. I see the majority of folks voted for this is the difficult part. So say you jumped into a conversation, you said hi. Now there is empty, awkward space that is going and exiting and entering into the conversation feels like, oh my gosh, all that feels so overwhelming. You don't know what you're doing. So let's jump into it. Um, let's move one layer past what do you do? So the easiest next question that a lot of us do is simply, what do you do? Or what are you working on? So my favorite thing is not what do you do, because that feels a little in your face, but I like to say, what are you working on? Because not everyone also what they do for a living is what they want to talk about. So I like to ask, what are you working on? Because that invites people to talk about the projects they're working on. It invites people to talk more about the smaller things that they're doing. So we're going to, though, move one layer past that. So what are you working on? And in fact, if what are you working on, though, is a helpful next step for you to put into your brain, one thing that I like to do as someone working constantly on my memory is if that is a helpful phrase, I'd love you to drop it into chat so you also remember it. But the phrase is, what are you working on? If that's helpful, drop it into chat. If it's not helpful, let me know and we'll hopefully work on another different phrase that we can keep. But what are you working on is the phrase. So drop it into chat if that phrase is helpful. Okay, so instead, we're going to now work past the what do you do, what are you working on question, and we are going to ask the next question, which is the story behind the role, right? Which is, how did you end up working on that, right? How did you end up in that career? How did you end up in that role? How did you end up there? Or what led you to this, right? So two different questions, exactly the same lane. So either how did you end up in that role, or how did you end up in that project, or what led you to that particular project, or what led you to that particular interest, right? So it's both questions that are going towards not just what do you do for a living, right? Because also I have been there in conversations, and I've been guilty of this, where you say the hi, hello, and you say, what are you working on? And then there's that awkward pause where you look at each other and then you think, I don't know what to ask beyond this. I don't know what to go beyond. What are we doing? And then I have a great comment here. I love what are you working on, because sometimes what do we do is not always easy to answer. Shelby and I talk about this all the time, because what we do, especially so many of us here on LinkedIn, if you're watching on LinkedIn, what we do is so multifaceted, right? We might be also working on 10 different projects. And also, I love to think about context is helpful. So if you are at a place, and great question, even for the unemployed, wonderful. What are you working on? Um, One thing that is helpful is thinking contextually because maybe I'm at an industry event that is more focused on my writing. Then what do I do becomes what am I working on in terms of my writing projects, right? Or maybe I'm at a marketing conference. So that is a place where I will likely talk more about my agency and the strategy work that I do there. So always also think contextually. Now, because some people in the room might be feeling so awkward and like you don't want to talk about any of this stuff, one thing that you can also do is pre-prepare those questions that you're going to ask. So think about the event that you're going to, and then once again, not to always hold this up, but write down what you are going to ask. And one thing that I like to do, obviously, is I put it into my mobile device. So I'll put it into my phone. What are the questions that I'm thinking about asking in case I have brain fog and don't remember, or just get very anxiety brained and forget what I'm going to ask? I'll write down those questions. So, if once again having a question of what are you working on is helpful for you, write that down in your phone. If it's helpful to also write down, then the next question is how did you end up in that role, or what path took you there, etc. These are all variations on the same next question. Now, the next question that I want to also bring up is what is taking up all your time this month? So we are end of August right now, mid-August, I guess. One question that's always helpful is once you're past that halfway point in the month or getting towards the end, you can always ask, what's taking up your time this month, or what's taking up your time this quarter? That is always a helpful time-based question that also is a nice next question, because then once again, it's an opener for people to talk about their next project. And I will have to say this, I've definitely been in conversations where I've said, honestly, next to nothing. I've truly said almost nothing, but people remember what an enjoyable conversation is. And not because I yapped, as the kids say, not because I kept talking and talking and talking. It's because I asked really thoughtful and insightful questions. I wasn't just waiting for them to stop talking so I could stop talking, which once again, we've all been there. I've been guilty of that. A lot of us have been guilty of that. We see, I have a great comment from Jeff. What are you working on? Big improvement since it's more informal, so it's a friendlier chat and feels less like an interview. Yes, as somebody who's literally interviewed people for a living for Forbes, I don't like to ask the what do you do because it feels so strong and in your face. I love to ask the question, what are you working on? And it also lets people choose what they want to talk about instead of listing their job title. So, what's fascinating to me is I was recently in Paris, and I have to say this, in especially European countries and other countries outside the US, people don't always want to talk about their job, right? People don't always want to talk about their job title, because I think that's another thing. I think in the US, we always want to ask people, what is your job title? And not everyone wants to give their job title. Also, and I saw that Lori had mentioned this before, if you are unemployed, you don't always want to mention your job title because you may not have a job title at this point in time. Maybe you have a next job hope, right? I always hesitate to use the word aspiration with jobs because hopefully you are truly getting that next job. So that next job is not just something that you're thinking about, it is the next step in your career. Okay, so we're going to keep going. We can also ask what's changed in your world recently, and that might open up more than a job title. That also might open up the door for them saying, oh, I recently switched from this career to this career, or I recently got a new role or new responsibilities, or I'm looking for my next opportunity, right? We're always opening the door to the conversation. So think about it like that. So the first thing we do when we say hi is we're knocking on the door, right? We're knocking on that door. And then the next step, when we are in the conversation, we are opening the door, and we want to open the door really gently and really carefully so we don't hit someone in the face, right? So if we're talking especially to another introvert, we don't want to be in their face, and we don't want to be so intense that they don't feel that they can respond. Okay, so another way, if you feel comfortable and you feel like this is the person that you want to engage more deeply with, we can also ask, how's it going really? Which, once again, this is only for if you want to engage on a deeper level with someone. How's it going really can open the door to, oh, it's really not going well, which, once again, we have all been subject to. We've all had our bad days. So, this is just another way to open the conversation up and find that deeper level. And then also, if they offer a detail that's interesting, follow that detail. So if I was talking to someone else and they said that they write for Marvel Comics, I would probably follow that detail. I'd say, "Oh, as an Archie writer, I'm curious what stories are you really interested in writing? What stories are you dying to write?" Right? I'd think about a super insightful next step. And I see another great comment here that's very long. People are so much more than a title, coming up with language about who you are and what you want to do, how you see yourself is important. And then this is very, very important, right? What you're calling yourself is super helpful. So, okay, so we're going to go on to the next part two of our part two, which is we're going to follow the energy in the conversation. So we have one good follow-up question does more for connection than five new topics, right? So instead of just jumping, instead of having a list of questions without listening to what the other person is saying, we want to always find the next question after the what are you working on? We want to find that next question really organically. And what does that mean? Once again, if they start talking about, oh, I just stepped into a managerial role at XYZ, then we can ask them questions about being a manager. We can ask them a question about being part of a team. So we always want to find what is the next question. One thing that we can do too, and this is active listening 101, is we can repeat the last few words back to them as a question. We can say, "Oh, so you're working on blah 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 blah?" Question mark. And then they'll hear that as question. They'll say, "Yes, I'm doing this this this," right? So we can always repeat the last few words back as a question. And also, if the conversation stalls, as it naturally will just over time, you can offer something small about yourself that's interesting to start the conversation again. So, say, "Oh, I just did a new hire. I hired a video person onto my team, and the hiring process was incredibly difficult." Now, if you're talking to, say, another entrepreneur, that might be a really nice opener because they'll say, "Oh, yes, hiring is always difficult. It was really difficult for me to hire my last project manager." And then you can start the conversation again. So it's all about giving gas to the car so it can keep going, or giving power to the car so it can keep going. Now, once again, if the conversation stalls, we can circle back to something else that they mentioned earlier in the conversation. And once again, everything that's done with curiosity as the intent is so much better. So if you follow the conversation from a curiosity perspective, so you say, "Oh, I remember earlier you said blah, blah, blah," right? And you follow that spark of curiosity, it comes out very naturally, and people want to be in conversation with you. And then listen for any overlaps that you can find. So, are they from the same city? Do they use the same tool at work? Did they have the same former employer? As someone who's from the Bay Area, I always love when I meet somebody else who either lives in the Bay Area or was previously from the Bay Area, because that to me is such a connection point, because people from Bay Area love to meet other people from the Bay Area. Or if I meet someone from LA, I'll say, what area do you live in? And then we'll laugh, because traffic is probably incredibly difficult to get from one part of LA to the other part of LA. So we'll laugh at either how close we are or how far we are, as in we are basically countries apart from each other. So it's helpful to find what is the overlap, right? What is overlap? And I'm just giving you the easy overlaps once again. It's location, it is perhaps the tools that you use, it is maybe a former employer. Okay. And it is helpful to then honor that connection that you have. So say, oh, that's hilarious. We're maybe the same person, right? People love finding the connection between themselves and other people. People love to be connected like that. We have another great comment here. When people don't ask me follow-up questions and go through a series of random questions, it feels very artificial to me, like we're not really connecting. And once again, we do this out of nerves, right? Some of us do it out of nerves. Some of us do it out of a true lack of interest in the conversation, where they ask the same 5 questions to the same people. So I offer that it's so helpful to not be that person, to offer and ask really thoughtful questions, right? Okay, so we're going to go through the last part of our part 2, which is protect your introvert battery while you're at it. So for those of you that don't know, I wrote this amazing book. I'm going to drag it out from underneath a pile of stuff, my other digital camera. Here's my book, Personal Branding for Introverts. Thank you, Shelby. Just dropped the QR code in the corner. So grab this. It is all about your introvert battery. It is all about finding the openers in conversation. So if you haven't already grabbed it, order it today. Grab it from your local library. Get it on Libby. A bunch of amazing places that you can get it. And of course, you can always get it at my link, goldiechan.com/book. Okay, so protecting our introvert battery. We're going to go into this idea right now. So your introvert battery, if you are an introvert, drains over time. And what's so funny is, as I've done this talk a billion times over the last year since my book came out, I've had extroverts come up to me and say, oh, I also have a battery that drains over time when I'm at a convention or I'm at an event, and I just need to not be talking to people. So even extroverts feel this drain. I will say this: curiosity costs less energy than fake interest does. Have you ever been in a conversation where you are so genuinely interested, and especially the introverts out there, you've been so genuinely interested that you just feel a little less tired from that conversation afterwards, because you are talking about something that you are so interested in? This is what's helpful. I try to be genuinely interested in the person that I'm talking to. And then I will give you a target for an event that you do. I always say I like to have 2 real conversations, right? Thanks, Lori. I like to have 2 real conversations with people at any event. Any event that I go to, I want those real conversations to happen. And I aim for that, just 2, not 10, just 2. And also, if it's helpful, if you feel overwhelmed, you can always do this one exercise. I like to talk about this exercise, and honestly, almost every talk I do, especially for introverts, which is I like to do a 10-minute walk away. So everyone has 10 minutes at a conference or an event to step away. I like to do this where I step physically outside. So I exit the building. I don't just step out in the hallway. I exit the building and I spend 2 minutes of that 10-minute time not on my phone at all, not on a digital device, not looking at anything. I spend it literally breathing in, hopefully, what is mostly fresh air. This doesn't work in Las Vegas, but breathing in the fresh air, uh, getting vitamin D into my eyeballs, because that's important and very healthy for you, and just breathing in some air and resetting my brain. Now, I find that this is so helpful. If you are not able to step away for 10 minutes, you can then, yes, step away for 5 minutes, step into the hallway, step into a quiet corner, and then just do some breathing exercises. Do 3 breaths in, do 3 breaths out, do some box breathing. And also, it is the quality of talking to people that is going to be Super, super helpful. Okay, so we're going to skip really quickly into part 3, graceful exits that keep the door open. And once again, drop into the chat any questions. We have about 5 minutes remaining, so just want to make sure I get into any other things. So we're going to go over 3 parts super quickly. 1, exit lines that you can use tonight. 2, build the bridge, then you can walk away. Number 12, and then the third part, close it out. Okay, so number 3. Okay, so first, exit lines you can use tonight. I'm going to say these pretty rapid fire because we have 5 minutes left. We have 4 minutes left now. 1, I'm going to meet more people. This was so good. So thanks. I'm going to meet more people. This was so good. Next, I want to grab a good seat before the next session starts. Glad to meet you, right? I promised myself I'd say hi to someone before we leave. Can we connect on LinkedIn? And then also close with a very specific compliment, plus your next step, which is let's connect on LinkedIn. Let's connect on Instagram. Can you give me your email, right? Or your phone. I tend to not ask for phone because phone is too personal, but email is also totally appropriate. And also use their name on the way out. I always remember when people remember my name. And once again, they don't need to know my first and last name, just my first name. So remember that. And also ask Shelby. Also, Shelby, can you drop the link now for the one sheet that people can use for building their personal brand? This is a free worksheet. Feel free to scan it and get your free worksheet. Okay, so next, build the bridge before you walk away. Send that LinkedIn request before you leave. So one way I make sure to connect with people on LinkedIn is while standing there, I have my phone in hand and I send that LinkedIn request and I watch them physically accept it on their phone. That is one way to make sure that you will actually be connected. Also, I type into the LinkedIn request, met at Marcom, right? Met at Adobe Max, met at whatever it is that I met them at. So that way they remember me. And later, if they go through their LinkedIn chats, they're like, how did I meet Goldie? They can see those 3 or 4 words and they'll remember that's where they met me at. And even if they don't remember, they just get a nice reminder of that. Okay. If you've offered anything to this person, an article, a podcast link, an introduction, give it to them within 48 hours. I cannot tell you how many people, and I'm guilty of not always doing this, but I cannot tell you how many people are so impressed when I say, I'm going to give you XYZ by the next day. And I do it. I deliver. I give them that link by the next day. So when you offer something, give it to them by the next 2 days, the next 48 hours. Okay. And also a single hyper-specific note 2 days later will beat a very generic, it was nice to meet you that night, right? So something referencing something you talked about in the conversation itself is helpful. And once again, if somebody is super important to you and you want to remember, I just honestly just always have my phone in hand. So what I do is I will take a note on my phone and just say, make sure to talk to Mark about blah, 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 right? And I'll leave that note in my phone. So when I send the message later, I have that note. Okay, we're going to close it out. We're going to remember that we have 1 opener line, 1 curiosity question, and 1 exit line. So boom, boom, boom. We have 3 different moments in time, and the rest we want to fill in with curiosity. So your homework for your next event is to do these 3 things in a row, but of course, while also listening. So we're going to fill in the gaps in between these 3 moments with genuine curiosity. We're going to remember, we're going to recall what they just said. We're going to repeat it back to them. This way we're fully engaged. We're also going to remember their first name. And one thing that I like to do, especially if I'm at an event, I'll take a picture of their badge. I'll say, hey, is it okay? I don't know. I keep using Mark. Is it okay, Mark, if I take a picture of your badge so I can remember later? And I'll take a picture of their badge and say, thanks, Mark, because I've also then gotten the cheat code of looking directly at their badge appropriately because I just took a picture. So make sure that you do that. Also, feel free to direct them and say, hey, I'm more talkative over email or I'm more talkative over LinkedIn DMs. Feel free to contact me there and to talk to me there. So that's also a nice way to talk to people. Okay, so here we go. And then I have a link to my next workshop handy. So if this was helpful, jump in, check out my next LinkedIn workshop. And Shelby can tell me what this LinkedIn workshop is because I'm now forgetting what my actual next workshop is. But my next workshop will, of course, always be on branding and marketing and always be on how it can be helpful. And actually, now I remember it is a private event on 8-27. So on August 27th, I'm going to do a special LinkedIn workshop. So I very rarely do LinkedIn how-to workshops. This is going to be a very beginner to mid-level workshop. So if you are super advanced on LinkedIn, this may or may not be the workshop for you. But I'm going to dive into something very exciting, which is LEO. It's this new term that I'm coining in the month of August because I'm a Leo, which is LinkedIn engine optimization. So this is the more advanced stuff. So we're going to go over a little bit of beginning stuff like how to structure your profile, etc. But we're going to go into super advanced stuff, which is the Leo stuff. I'm so excited. Please RSVP here. So this is an RSVP event. It's a free event, but RSVP and jump in, and it will be very hands-on. So very much, once again, just like this, you can ask all the questions you want about LinkedIn, which I know folks have so many questions about LinkedIn. So feel free to jump in. And yes, of course, I'm going to end with this great comment also from Shelby. Love the idea of having 3 solid scripts, but not making it a robotic conversation. And yes, once again, I want you to lead with curiosity. Try to be curious about this person. Imagine that this person you're talking to is someone that your best friend just introduced you to. So you're naturally going to be a little bit more curious about this person. Once again, thank you everyone for jumping into this LinkedIn Live that was genuinely live. Whenever I see a LinkedIn Live that wasn't always live, I'm like, oh no. But this one is a LinkedIn Live that was genuinely live. Thank you so much for asking questions, joining in. I hope you'll join me on my private workshop that's all about LinkedIn. It'll be very exciting. That will be a very cool session. So I hope to see you all there. And if you have any questions or comments, etc., you can always drop them onto my various LinkedIn posts that I'm posting throughout the day, throughout the week. But of course, as you can see, I respond directly to when you join my live. I will pull out those comments and respond directly to them. So this is honestly the best way to get direct access to me and ask your questions for free often. Okay, everyone, I hope you have a beautiful rest of the week. I hope to see you in my next session. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. I'll see you later. Bye.